Thank you. Yes, I can kind of see you. I like the green and white.
Yeah, yeah. I'll make sure easier to see.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't. I'll mostly have you introduce yourself, and everyone's had a look at your LinkedIn and read up a little on you, so they kind of know where you're coming from. But so you were what, class of 2018? Is that right?
Class of 2018 in the communication studies department. So I didn't really get too much of like the mass media of like the actual production side of it, but I was on the Wire TV Club, and I produced The Oval, if you guys know that show. So that kind of gave me like the hands-on technical side of it, while a lot of the communication study classes were more of like the comm theory and like understanding communications.
Right. So, and you took a number of media classes though, right? Because we had a few classes together.
Yeah.
So even if you weren't a media major, you definitely, you can talk some dirt on me and my colleagues like Professor Tarosian. I know you had quite a few of us, right? So, but yeah, I mean, it'd be great just to have you kind of, begin with a little bit of a self introduction and really about kind of how you got into news and journalism, I guess first as an interest, maybe even here at Oneonta, but then particularly when you hit the market, if you will, and you started looking for jobs, like where did you start, and kind of what was your career development up till now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you first of all for having me. I'm super excited. I wasn't at SUNY Oneonta for too long, but I am a Oneonta local. So I grew up in the area, went to elementary, middle, and high school in Oneonta, which was, one heck of an experience. So when I finally wanted to get my bachelor's, I was like, let me stop messing around, just move back to Oneonta, finish these last 2 years and get this degree that everyone says I need so bad. But my journalism story really started when I was getting my associates at Hudson Valley Community College. So I was like, an okay high school student, definitely needed the community college in order to get into the 4-year. But Hudson Valley ended up being a really good program for me because it was hands-on. So they only required one semester in the classroom, and the other half was at this new school of radio and television, where you got to be like hands-on doing the choices were broadcast journalism or radio. So my first year I did broadcast journalism, which is, TV news pretty much. And then the second year I did radio, just like your kind of local radio DJ stuff. Then when I went to Oneonta, I focused more on like the communications theory, as I was saying. I was just interested in relationship building, really, people, and how different everyone is, and we're all living together. So that's kind of why I decided to study communications as a way to understand society and the masses through media. And after I graduated, I told you guys I did the Wire TV. So that was some great hands-on experience. When I graduated, it took me about 6 months to find a job in the industry. I was like, on LinkedIn, kind of like doing all the right things, I think. And then I finally stumbled on the Spectrum News job in Albany. So if you guys are familiar with Spectrum News, New York One, they're, national local company. I got a job as an assignment editor at the covering capital region. So like Albany, Schenectady, Troy, but then also the Hudson Valley area, which is where I am now. If you're familiar with like Woodstock, Kingston, Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, that's the Hudson Valley, a little bit closer to the city. My job at Spectrum News was an assignment editor. If you know anything about TV news, they say the assignment editor is the heartbeat of the newsroom. And that means like I wasn't on television. You'll never see me in front of the camera. I was very much so like behind the scenes organizing the day's news. So it was pretty much like I would work with a reporter to make sure that they had a story topic, that they had people to interview, sound for TV, and that they knew all the information about the person, like, their name, background, what their story was going to be, where they could meet them. If we're getting them on television for 5, I would have to plan out to make sure that they were all set up with the cameras and everything ready for the 5 o'clock hit. So it was a lot of behind the scenes stuff at Spectrum News. And then to kind of bring it to where I am now, while I was working in this kind of like commercial TV media landscape, I saw a bunch of inequities, like a lot of, wow, this is kind of how, you hear about the whitewashing of media. I was part of the machine that was doing that. And it took me about 6 months really to realize it. And then I started kind of fighting back against it, trying to bring more representation to the Albany news, getting community organizers on TV as opposed to just like the mayor or the police, things like that. So I stayed there for almost 2 years, kind of battling it out, like saying, I know that there's something better, but I just haven't found it yet. So finally I decided to leave the job, start an independent project that could start building something that I thought was more representative of what America and America's localities look like. And throughout that process of trying to build something, I did a lot of research of like, okay, what is local news going to look like after the Daily Star is no longer here type thing? Or, what is local news going to look like once someone like me has resources to build a network? And that's when I discovered kind of what I'm in now, which is the nonprofit media landscape, which is, people coming in and trying to do media from like an equitable perspective and look at news really as information and say, hey, journalists have all of these civic skills where we can be providing information to communities who really need it in order to create a more equal society, right? And that's what these news companies are doing. They're saying the commercial business model isn't working anymore. We're not going to charge, poor Black and brown people to receive information. We're just going to give it to them based on what they tell us they need. And that's kind of the industry that I'm in now. The job I have is a network coordinator. So very similar to the assignment editor position at Spectrum News, except I'm working with people that are in the nonprofit industry. So I work with about maybe 40 different news organizations that are nonprofit all over the country. One of them is in New York, in New York City, documented. They do immigrant news, but the rest of them are in cities like Chicago, Detroit. We have stuff in California, like pretty much all over. And I help strengthen their efforts. So if they have like an idea on something in the industry that they want to talk about, I'll coordinate meetings for them to come together. We did like a big conference in Atlanta where like all 40 organizations came together. I planned the conference. Sometimes I'll like sit in on their conversations and take notes and then like report back summaries to people that weren't there. I'm really trying to like be on like the beat of what's next in the local news industry and get ahead of like the people who want to kind of like control the power and the funding of it to better like distribute those funds and everything equally. So I'm trying to draw attention to like this new nonprofit side of the industry so people know what's next and what they can be a part of outside of the media infrastructure that we all already know, such as Daily Star, Spectrum News, New York Times. That stuff has been there, but there's a whole new industry getting built right now that I'm really excited about. So that's kind of just my intro of how I got started to where I am. But I'm ready for the next phase of conversation here, hearing what else you guys want to hear from me. I see Bottomley just got up.
Sorry, the IT guy had a question about the projector, and I said it's working fine.
Okay, cool.
They thought there was a problem. So, do you guys, maybe we could pause and ask you, that was a nice kind of entree into what you're doing now. And Samantha, do you want to ask your question? Because it was related particularly to People's Perception Project, so.
Yeah, sure. You kind of just talked about it a little bit, but I read the article that you published about newsrooms opening up their editing process to marginalized groups, and read that you left the news station, like you said, because of power imbalances and not focusing on more important issues that would affect a more diverse group of news readers. So basically my question was, what do you think the most effective way to share what you think should change in a news station or other media-related company would be?
I think that's a great question. The most effective way to kind of share what I think. I mean, I think that there's people that are doing it in a lot of different ways, and I want to show respect to that because there's just like a lot of like Black and brown journalists that are in the system right now battling it out as part of that machine. And I'll tell you, that is not easy at all. and it's really important work. And there's people like, you know, in sort of like this racist, white supremacist system that are taking care of the day-to-day. So they are still telling stories that matter to like the Black community, to the impoverished community. Like there are people that are in the traditional commercial media landscape doing that day-to-day work. And I think as people like me kind of step out of it and, you know, build this new thing, we need those people. So I think like as long as you're thinking about the most vulnerable in either industry, that's a good way to do that. I think like, you know, my article, not to, you know, prop me up, but I think like joining kind of like the public discourse is an important thing, like just speaking your truth somewhere where people can hear it. But then I also would say like, you have to be building something else, right? So that's kind of the work I'm doing now is the people I'm working with don't have the most resources right now, not compared to Spectrum News or New York Times. But they're doing the hard work of organizing and movement building and power building in order to replace those harmful structures that some people are still working in right now. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's deconstructing the systems that exist that are harming communities on a day-to-day basis by like this way of storytelling and criminalizing poverty in the news and all this kind of stuff. You got to do something to like throw a bomb at that. But you also have to be thinking about, okay, so once we abolish this local news system as we know, what are we going to have instead? And putting some energy towards that. And then just like telling people about it, because it can be very much so become like an elite thing if you're building something new that no one knows about. I'm like, that's like worst case scenario, because then you build it and you're like waiting for people to come. So I think like everything has to be happening at the same time, dismantling the racist system, talking about the fact that it's racist, and also talking about the fact that something better is getting built right now. So I think just like taking a holistic approach to the industry and what happens when one thing dies and something new is getting built. What about the people that are just trying to live their life and just like want information on voting or like street closings? What do we do with those people? So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, you're raising so many questions. I think we can continue to talk about kind of the future of news and maybe what these people's role might be in it. And but to go back to, I think we can obviously come back to that, to your kind of personal career path. Just a couple of things, like you were mentioning that it took you, what would you say, 6 months to get the Spectrum job? Mm-hmm. And maybe can you walk us through that a little bit? Like what was it like being on the market? What do you think were some of the problems that you had, or and maybe also, you know, it tied into that, like in retrospect, were there things that you could have been doing differently?
Yeah,
that you might recommend, advice for these students.
Sure, absolutely. I think when I was getting ready to graduate college, I was very focused on getting a job. Like I very much so thought like a job is everything. Like I thought like people were coming out of college, like getting like $60,000 salaries and like at least in the city. And like I had this kind of like, media driven portrayal of what it meant to be in the industry. So I think like looking back on that, I would have given myself a little bit of grace. I was like really stressed the 6 months after college trying to find a job. And it wasn't until I decided to like really look locally that I was like, you know what, I know I can get this job in Albany. And then I got the job and I realized, wow, like this is a great job because it's giving you the experience. So I did like a lot of searching, but it wasn't till I decided to like kind of like come closer to home that I really found jobs that I was like, I feel much more confident going in these interviews because I know I can get these jobs. So that was a big part of it. And then I think like the patience, like kind of being easy on yourself. But I also was a student that was like, I didn't wait to start my career. Like I started my career my freshman year in college, I would say, and got like a paid internship and started taking like contract work, like 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, whatever I could get. So by the time I was a senior, I had already built a whole portfolio. I was doing the Oval for 2 years. I had a lot of confidence going into the job market. And I think that's another reason why I had like this expectation of like what I was going to get. So I think that's definitely something I would recommend is like, don't wait for someone to give you permission to start your career. Like just start doing it. And that will lead you to places. And then I guess just like be confident, like I think like the whole imposter syndrome thing of like when you're first taking your first job, you think everyone else has been in the market for so long and that they have all these skills. Like there's a training period for your job, which I think is like really important that I didn't really consider. It's like, oh, once I get this job, no one's really expecting me to be good at it for the first few months, like at all. To the point where I was kind of frustrated when I started the job because I was like, come on, like I'm here to like make TV, like I can do this. And they were like, just hold on, like you'll get there. So just be confident and trust that your employer is going to like put you in a job that you're ready for, and they'll train you and pay you to get trained throughout like the first like 90 days of your job, I would say. It wasn't until like the past 90 days, the first 90 days that I really started doing the job by myself without the support of like my manager or like my colleagues.
I can definitely say that if there's one word I would describe you as a student, was driven. I like that you were saying that you felt like when you started here that you were already building your career, and you definitely always came across to me as extremely driven. And I think that's something that, I mean, we've been, and the idea that you're saying that, don't wait for someone to give you permission, right? I mean, we've kind of been reading that and saying that, but it's nice to hear someone in your position, to kind of confirm that. How many of you guys are involved with Wire? I know you are, Priya. Anybody else?
I produce a show on Wire, so I'm going to ask a question, like, how do you think that like helps you like into the industry?
Yes, I think Wire was good. I'm like, DC's still there, right?
Yeah, he is.
Yes. Okay. He's, one of those local legends, I would say. Just because he'll give you the resource. You have to ask. I think that's one of the things DC definitely told me is like, you have to ask for what you want. But if you have the guts to ask, he'll definitely help you get it, just as an advice. But how did Wire help me? I mean, considering that my first job was in TV news, Wire was very important for my professional development. I also was a producer of the Oval. So being able to see every position really helped me. There's some people who are like, I want to be a camera person, and they love the camera and they want to get up every day and operate that camera. And I say, if you're a person like that, do it, go for it. But I am a person that just loves like the holistic approach to it. So like, I want to see like what the lighting people are doing. I want to know what the talent is going to say and what they're wearing. Like, I want to know what the camera people want to do, who's the music that we're going to have at the show. I liked everything. Who's the audience? Who's going to watch this and cheer for us? So that's what I was doing as a producer, kind of seeing the whole picture. And if I connect that to the positions that I've taken, such as like the assignment editor, that's very much so focused on the success of everyone in the newsroom, to my coordinator position now, where I'm like, I'm not just focused on one program or one individual. I'm looking at the whole industry and like, what does the industry need? What do all these people need to succeed? And I think that's very similar to like the position I was at Wire. I think Wire really gave me the confidence to say that when I took my first job in a TV station, it wasn't the first time I saw TV production. It wasn't the first time I saw someone read a teleprompter or lights be on or understand what it means to write a script. So I think as long as you can use like Wire TV and like college in general to get as many firsts out of your way, I feel like that's the important thing, because once you do something one time, it's not nearly as scary when you go back to do it that second time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. So it sounds like when you were first applying for jobs and you said things were kind of slow, I assume that meant you were kind of fixated on like New York City or other big kind of urban locations. And that's why, because you said then you kind of scaled back, if you will, and started more locally. I wonder if you could say maybe a little bit about a place like Spectrum News and particularly you're obviously at the Capital Region 1. Because if you guys don't know, they have those like all around. There's like a Spectrum News in Syracuse. I think there's a Binghamton one. There's obviously a few in the city, but there's like a Westchester one and the New York one in the city. So like that's become like that idea that I think sometimes we get fixated on wanting to be where we think like, media and entertainment is all New York and LA or whatever. Mm-hmm. And even news, it's like, it's New York, it's DC, it's, a few big cities. But of course, I mean, obviously where you are now too, with working with, with the nonprofits is the importance of local news. And that at least from a career perspective, I think for all of you in this room, it shouldn't be something you look down on, right? It is at least a good stepping stone, right? And if you follow a lot of journalists, and I mean, Sarah, I mean, sure you're seeing this all the time, is most people started out in some form of local news. Like you take, when last week, when Joe was talking about Today Show, we had someone who was a producer for the Today Show. Like Hoda started out in like local news, or Gail King, who's the CBS Mornings, is one of the biggest TV anchors in the business today, highest paid too. Started out doing local news, I think in Connecticut, right? She's Oprah's BFF, right? But she's, your career is often going to be steps, right? And local news is something that obviously you feel is a vital, political and kind of cultural importance in our society, but it's also from a career perspective, it's a great place to get your foot in the door. And so, as you say, like you with Wire TV, learning a lot of skills, but you also were, not only, learned a lot at Spectrum, but you're expected to learn. I mean, when you get into a new job, they'll train you kind of on the job. And maybe you could say a little bit more. And I know there was a question or two. I think, Brett, your question, it would get to maybe in a minute about working at Spectrum. Like, what do you feel like were some of the most valuable skills that you learned in that first job at the local news level that you really kind of cherish, even though you've moved on, that you feel like you'll really have helped shape your career?
There's a lot of little things, and then there's big things. So I'll start, like, a big one was relationship building. At the assignment desk, you're answering the phone. So like anyone can call the newsroom and either give you news, report news, or critique news that's on air. And I can call pretty much anyone who I want for a source to give me sound for a story, to set up an interview with one of my reporters, or to come in to the studio. So like the phones and the desk opens up a whole bout of possibilities in a newsroom. So, being able to keep relationships with like key people, like, not for nothing, but the cops, they have like a public information officer. So it's not like I have to call the cop station every single time. I can call the public information officer. And if I have a good rapport with him, he'll give me the information I'm looking for, type thing. Same with like politicians. They all have reps, PR people. So I'm not like calling Antonio Delgado himself. I'm calling Antonio Delgado's one of four, PR people. And being able to build those relationships and understand like what everybody needs, what everyone's afraid of, what everybody wants. That was a very successful skill. I learned a little bit of that in communication, just studying the theory aspect of it, of how people deliver and receive messages. But that was a huge one that I learned at Spectrum News because it gave me the opportunity to practice it. Like in school, we're learning about it, we're doing tasks and group projects, but there's nothing more real than having a real job and really being on the phone with the police, so that was a great experience. I would say like other things like journalistic skills, reporting. I think like just having to get information right was a huge skill I learned on the job. Before taking the job at Spectrum, it wasn't as serious, my reporting. Like I was reporting for the Daily Star. So it's like the stakes just didn't seem as high. But when you put something on television, it's like, you got to get it right. You got to get the spelling right. The number has to be accurate, like everything has to be right. So really listening to what people were telling me, taking notes, and then reporting it back to like producers who were going to put it on air. That was a skill that I didn't even know I needed to that extent. But that was something that took a long time of like, okay, I got to read this over 10 times and make sure it's exactly the way that he put it in this text or exactly the way he put it on my voicemail. Another skill that I learned at Spectrum that I think was really important for the industry, I would say, I think the relationship building, the reporting was really important. And then like, I think in news, especially television news, if anyone's interested in broadcast, it's very fast. So I think like, that's the other thing, like The Wire kind of helps you prepare for it, but not nearly like it's cable news. Like the worst thing that could happen is like it goes black on television. So because of that fear, there's just such a hustle to it, right? So like when it comes to like breaking news and like, and when I talk about the future of the industry, this sort of reporting is becoming a little bit more, I think, frowned upon. But when I was in cable news, it very much was like, if it bleeds, it leads. Like if somebody got shot, if somebody got stabbed, like you need to make a decision on how you're going to put that on television, like very fast. So that's the other important skill that I really learned that I think that is a big one is this decision making. It's like sometimes you would make the wrong decision, but making the wrong decision and making the wrong decision fast is almost better than like making the right decision 10 minutes late in television news. So it was like, I just became someone that was like, you know what? There's a lot of noise. There's the police scanners. This person's doing their live shot over here, but I'm going to believe that I should send this person over to this corner for this live shot right now. And you just have to trust yourself and make those decisions. I think that goes a long way, like in journalism, but also just life, like being able to say, this is what I think I should do and going to do it. And if you made the wrong mistake, be like, whoop, that was a wrong mistake. Better luck next time. So that was, I think those are my biggest lessons from working at Spectrum.
Some other questions, whether it's about working for Spectrum, maybe, or yeah, Dante.
So like, how prepared did you feel when you entered your career? Like you said, there was like a 3-month training period. Did like you get there and it was like, oh shit, I have to learn so much new content? Or was it more of like, all right, this is like familiar? Like,
I think I had a really good foundation from college, honestly. Like I felt like I understood what the job was. I think the biggest adjustment, and that's kind of the 3-month period, is just to make sure you're ready for the scope of it, because it's not like, it's news is people's lives. Like you're reporting on people and what's going on in communities. And that aspect is very real. And I think like no one can really prepare you for that. And I think that's kind of where the 3 months comes in. Is like, okay, we're not going to just give you the power to like report on crime and like put someone's mugshot on air unless we know that you know it's the right mugshot and this is the right crime and this is the right language. So I think that's the biggest jump, right, from college and kind of doing it on campus to the real world. Is now these aren't your friends. These aren't people that you know. These are people that are going through circumstances and we're reporting on circumstances. So you have to be really careful and cautious of that and really think about, you know, the people that are involved in journalism. And I think that was the big learning curve, was like, wow, this is, and not only when it comes to, you know, crime and everything, like, you know, telling someone's story about, you know, like how they recovered from grief after someone was shot, or, you know, and TV just makes everything so much realer, because it's like not just words, it's someone's face and they're crying. And it's like, once you get to tell these stories that you realize really matter, you realize that being a journalist is very serious, especially when it comes to TV, because I think video is like, you know, everyone watches it. You know, everyone's watching TV, especially local news. It's like with Spectrum, the communities think like they want to see themselves on television. So that's what they're watching. Like people don't want to read the newspaper anymore. So I think that's like the biggest thing that you have to prepare for, is that, you know, these are people's lives and, you know, everything that you report really matters. So just being ready for that and like ready to like make a mistake about someone's important life and have to talk to them about that, or have to take that, you know?
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Brett.
You talk more about what you're doing now in the Hudson Valley. I'm from that area. That's why I'm wondering from a government. I think it's very interesting what you're doing now with your new organization.
Okay, so I think I only heard part of that. I heard, can I talk about now, but maybe bottomly, or maybe if you don't mind repeating it one more time.
You mind speaking up a little bit, Brett?
Yeah. Do you mind talking about your organization now and what you're doing now in the Hudson Valley?
Yes, absolutely. So what I'm doing now, I'm always doing 101 things. I will always be that person that has multiple contracts, a full-time job, and a side hustle. That's just the kind of person I've always been. So now I talked a little bit about the network that I'm coordinating with the nonprofit newsroom, and like, you know, planning the event in Atlanta and all that kind of stuff. So I do that. But then I also have my business, which looks like you guys did a little bit of research on, People's Perception Project. And Bottomly like helped me with this too. Like I did a really important call with him like a year ago. And I'm like actually really proud how spot on I was with this future of the industry stuff. But People's Perception Project, when I started it, I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I was kind of following this path of something's not right in traditional media. It's, you know, the racism, right? This isn't right, the business model, and trying to find something new. But now how I'm packaging People's Perception Project is a civic engagement organization. So we do programming for middle and high school students, pretty much we have 3 programs. But it all comes from the same theory. And the idea is that, you know, students need a way to get connected to their local fight for justice. So their local grassroots organizers, you know, they need a way to get connected to that. So that's what my programmings do. We do civic engagement. We do journalism programs where we bring a local journalist into a classroom and they collaboratively tell a story with the kids. So it's predominantly working with middle and high school students, which I really, really like and was totally not part of the plan. Like I never would have thought that I would be in education in the way that I am now. Just because I was never a kid that like really liked middle or high school. Like I liked college because it's kind of like you can do your own thing. And I had it figured out by then. But when I was in middle and high school, I was not a kid that like was super excited about the structure of school. So I bring a lot of that energy when I go back to middle and high school. I'm like, yeah, this is crazy, right, guys? This sucks. Like, let's do something for justice. And the kids are like, all right, like she's cool, I guess. So yeah, that's what I do with People's Perception Project. What I'm really proud of with this is my partnership with the NAACP. So when I started the business, I realized I don't have any relationships with schools, and my relationships with the news are like few. Like I still have a relationship with Spectrum and everything. But I needed a way to like get funding. I needed a way to like open doors for me pretty much. So I partnered with the NAACP, which was great because everybody knows the NAACP and everyone's probably willing to give the NAACP money for programming. So that's kind of been my business structure is, you know, in Albany, I have a partnership with the Albany NAACP. The 2 of us together go into the schools and do the programming that I designed. Now I'm getting another contract with Rome schools and the NAACP in Rome. And it's the same kind of business structure, right? Like I reach out to the NAACP there. I'm like, hey, I have this great journalism program for kids. I have this great civic engagement program for seniors in high school. Can you help me get a grant for it? And can you make the school district do it pretty much? So that's the work that I'm doing now. So like, I'm pretty busy right now because I'm getting final grants in, trying to make sure that I can get my programs funded. And I'm, you know, sending like scheduling like all the year programming for like Albany. And now I have another school to do. But I still have a full-time job doing the network coordinating stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty busy, but that's People's Perception Project. I think it's going to grow at a pretty slow rate. Like, I'm like, if I could add 1 school every year, I think that would be pretty good. You know, like for, you guys want to know some prices of things? I know Bottomley asked me to throw out some numbers.
Sure, go ahead.
So for one of my programs, like the Student-Centered Journalism program, where I was saying I bring a journalist into the class, the way I have that is it's 3 classrooms, 3 classes. So 40 minutes, 40 minutes, 40 minutes. First, we analyze the news. Then second class, we decide what the story is going to be. The journalist goes and tells it. And the third class is like a celebration and critique of the published story. So for that, like right now for Rome schools, I'm getting paid $4,500 for the 3 programs. So I'm like, it's pretty damn good, right, guys? So I'm like, this is like very possible, things that I never thought was possible, but it's because of like my strategy, I think, of like partnering with an organization that is just more well-known and has more resources, and like they can help me. You know, it's like I pretty much, it's like me running the business, and it would be impossible for me to do, you know, like all this programming, all this grant writing, all this relationship building by myself while I have a job, you know? So the NAACP shares resources where, like, you know, if we have meetings with the school district, they'll send out the Zoom links and the calendar invites for me. So I don't really have to manage that. I just have to kind of show up. You know, they'll do, you know, the grants. I'll write the grants, but then they'll like sign them and send them to people that they have relationships with, take in the funding under their accounting, and then just write me a portion of it. So there's a lot of like partnerships building and like strategy that's going into like me being able to like start this business and like actually receive the funding and like support that I need to like let people know who I am, type thing.
Yeah. So I wonder, maybe you could say a little bit about, you know, working for a company, right? So you worked for Spectrum and you're a salaried worker versus now you're essentially, it's a form of freelance, right? I mean, you're kind of both a freelancer and like running almost like a startup, I guess, at the same time.
Yes.
And I mean, you mentioned that you're a very, you know, driven person, and you're, you know, you're always working on multiple things, right? So obviously there's a certain kind of personality type that it takes to have that kind of hustle. And to particularly now what you're doing, working, you know, as a freelancer, if you will. Maybe you could say a little bit more about like what you think it takes to succeed, and maybe what you like, you know, better or worse about either being on a salary position versus working freelance.
Yes. So this is actually like, I'm in a time of transition right now. So for the past year, I would say I've been doing contract work, getting the business up and running. Like I manage a band on the weekends, stuff like that. So right now I'm in a transition from having this contract position with this network that I'm coordinating to them offering me a full-time. Okay. So financially, this has been a big change because I'm getting paid like top dollar as a contractor, where it's like, I'm a consultant, I'm as good as it gets, hire me, I'm going to coordinate the heck out of whatever you need me to. And, you know, be making $45 an hour contract. And then the transition to full-time, where it's like, now you're going to get a full-time job where you don't have to track every one of your hours, like billable hours type thing, like a lawyer would do. It's pretty much like what contractors have to do. It's like, you know, I would bill for this class from 2 to 250. That's my $45. That's an hour. But I would have to write that down and think about that on like 20, 30 hours a week. It's a lot to manage of like, what am I doing with my hours? What are my deliverables for the 45 an hour? Now I'm in negotiation for this full-time job, because it's like 45 an hour at a full-time job is practically $93,000. No one's paying me $93,000 right now. Do I think eventually? Yes, catch me in a few years. But right now that's a big stretch, but I had to really calculate and say, okay, like what are benefits worth? You know, what right now I have to pay my own taxes as a freelance and contractor. So even though I'm getting large checks, I have to take some of that money and put it aside, not just for regular savings, but for taxes, where I'm going to literally have to pay it back up again at the end of the year. So that's a big thing to consider, is like, you know, you might get a lot more money up front as a contractor, but there's a reason for that, probably for like taxes, benefits. And, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into managing the schedule of like having all these different contracts and like managing all these people's expectations. Whereas, you know, once I start full time, I don't have to track my hours anymore. Like, you know, for example, I could be working today, and as long as I'm either responding to like my Slack or keeping up with my email, which I didn't even get one email today from anyone in the group, because most people in nonprofit are like, it's Friday. So you have to like think about that. Like salary is great because you're getting benefits, dental, you know, your therapy, health insurance, all this stuff is paid for. You know, usually you get benefits, like, you know, if you're working from home, like I'm going to get like a professional development stipend so I can like take classes and learn, and like a stipend for like my office supplies. So I think like contracting is great because it kind of like, there's no limit on really what you can take in, and there's no one policing that. Whereas when you're full-time, that's your salary. That's what you're going to make. And you can maybe take a job on the weekend, but for the most part, people don't want you like competing, like working for someone that has a similar mission type thing. So you're really kind of limited to whatever the salary position is. Bottomly, you asked about like what kind of person I think it takes to be able to manage more of like a contractor. Like some people are like, you know, hey, I'll take the $40,000 salary. I'll work Monday through Friday. I'll take my weekends off and I'll be happy. Other people are like fighting generational poverty and they need a little bit more than the 40K. So they're going to pick up some other stuff. And I get that too. Respect to whatever you decide. But if you do decide that you're someone like me who doesn't really want to like rest on the weekends, and you kind of want to just do this hustle grind stuff, I would definitely say a calendar. Like I literally can't go anywhere without my calendar. Like I'm not someone that has the memory. So it's like, if I catch you out in the street and you're like, Wednesday, the 21st, what are you doing? I'll be like, literally no idea. I need my calendar in front of me. Some people do. I do the Google Calendar too, but I'm such like a pen and paper kind of person. So I think like you have to be willing to like run your calendar. Like no one's going to care about your calendar more than you should type thing. So I think that's a big part of it being like, oh, it's up to me to fill up these empty boxes. Like that's how I would always look at it. Like it's going to be October. Like, do I have anything on my calendar? Do I have any meetings? Do I have any deadlines? Do I have any networking events? Like, if not, it's up to me to fill that up, which is very freeing because you're like, I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. But it's also like everything I do is because I put it there. So it's a lot of extra work. I think like having your own space is very important when you're freelancing and being a contractor. Like when I was at Oneonta, I was doing this contract work, like writing for the Daily Star, like taking up like creative agency, social media management jobs, like doing that kind of stuff. And I lived at my parents' house. And it was such a nightmare because I feel like people don't really understand that you're working unless you're at work. Like if you go to McDonald's and you work, you know, your regular shift, no one can bother you, right? You have everything you need there. But when you're home and everyone else is like off of work, that makes it really hard to stick to your deadlines and like focus on what you're doing. So I would say like get yourself an office or like a quiet room, or make sure you know the schedule of the library and that you're like reserving private spaces. Like I reserved this space today in the Kingston Library for this. So I think like that's a big thing of it. It's like just being willing to put your career and like what you want to do first, because people will not understand, because they're going to have a salary job where they go to work and they leave, or, you know, they're going to have this traditional lifestyle. So you have to be willing to like sacrifice that and say like, hey, like I want to go get lunch at 2:00, but I also have to make sure by, you know, 3:00 that I'm in a private space because I'm going to take this networking meeting about an opportunity that might come up in the next 6 months.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about like networking and kind of finding job opportunities and things. Although, Justine, do you want to ask your question? Because you had a really interesting question about kind of social media, and you're very active on Twitter and social media. I think it was a good question.
Yeah, he gave us your Twitter to look through. So I was just wondering, because my Twitter, I'm always on Twitter, but I'm always like retweeting like funny things or posting funny things. So I was wondering if you had to like delete your Twitter and like recreate one, or did you? How do you go about that for people to see? I don't want anyone seeing mine.
Yeah, no, social media is like so hard, right? Like even like hearing Bottomley say that, I'm like, I'm not, compared to like people that are like in the industry, I'm not putting anything really relevant up there. Like no, I'm not a journalist that does that necessarily. Like I didn't go back and like make a business page or something like that. But as I've developed, I've adjusted and edited to fit who I am now, right? So like I changed my cover photo to like be, cool. Like I'm a mountain girl now. Like, I want people to know who I am. So that's what I think about with my social media. It's like, if you go to this, will you get a vibe for who I am? Because that means so much in the media industry of like, how people receive you is like everything, right? And, there's a certain extent to it. But no, I never deleted. I was always one of those kids that just felt like whatever I did, like this is my pathway type thing. So I didn't want to like heavily filter myself. Like if I had like an annoyance or like a grievance with like SUNY Oneonta, like I'm the kind of person that would tweet it and I would stand on it. You know what I mean? Like I tweeted that and I'm going to leave that there. Like, and when I go to my job interview, I wasn't the kid that was like, I'm going to delete my tweet about something I was passionate about because I want to get this job. Like I sacrificed in that way of like, I'm going to speak my truth. And if you don't want me to speak my truth, then I guess I'm not going to get the salary, or I guess I'm not going to get this contract. So I kind of take that approach with social media as I just try to be myself. There's so much pressure that I think nowadays I'm more lean to not posting if I have like anxiety around something, or if I'm like thinking, this might come back to haunt me or something. I just put it in my group chat instead. But I say you definitely, in the media industry, you definitely need a Twitter, especially as a journalist. Like if you don't have a Twitter and you're a journalist, you're either top dollar or nothing at all. And it's probably going to be nothing at all because very few people are top dollar without a Twitter. And then like, the traditional things of like nothing, like obviously like, as long as there's nothing racist, homophobic, or classist, I think you're fine on your Twitter. It's like the best thing you can do is let people know who you are, especially if, you're someone great. You want them to know like, I'm a overall good person. I'm funny. I care about, social justice, and, I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I think that's really the point of social media. And like you guys saw, like I tag, it's also using social media the way they want you to, like with the pin posts, I put my article out there, those are things that's like, as I'm adding people now, like with this new industry work and like following people on Twitter, like I want them to come to my profile and see like, oh, I'm with this organization, City Bureau. That's a really good organization. And I founded my own company, and I wrote an article. Boom. That's pretty much what you need, like for people to see is that like, you're innovating, you're not waiting for people to give you permission. You started your own project, but you're also getting experience from someone that has some sort of credibility, and that you have a voice, that you have something to say. I think that's like the most important thing in this industry.
for networking, it was just like I'll ask one final question and then see what the students have, because we got just about 5 minutes left. So yeah, I would agree with you. For particularly for news and journalism, like Twitter is kind of where it's at. Whatever you think about Twitter, whatever. I mean, that's kind of professionally at least, that's where a lot of the social media action is going to be. But are there any other like online kind of networking opportunities or recommendations that you might have? Like, for instance, are there any Facebook groups for jobs, or for, particularly, I guess, with your work with like local news, are there any kind of online communities that you think would be good for someone to be, part of or tuned into if they're looking for work similar to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for work similar to me, I would say like newsletters are kind of a good place to look for information, because you'll get like larger companies that will report on the industry. Like one of the things I'm doing is developing a newsletter about the group as a way to like tell people like this is happening. So I would say like American Journalism Project has a pretty good newsletter where they're larger, where they're receiving funding, but they're still kind of like small enough where they have like their ethics on point. So I'd say American Journalism Project is a good one. Democracy Fund, like looking at like the organizations that they're supporting and giving money to, like those are usually more like the participatory kind of new industry folk that they're going to, support. I think like those newsletters are a good thing. Like, I think there's the Pointer newsletter. I think that's pretty good for more like people who are into like more traditional media. Like if you're not ready for the nonprofit, you want to give a go at like traditional, I think Pointer is a good middle ground for newsletters. I think like the website Gather, Gather, that's good for just, again, following like journalism. So they'll say, oh, look at this organization. And it's like for networking, you have to do the networking, right? Like you're not going to just like subscribe to a newsletter and then the newsletter is going to say, here's this job that pays 60 grand. Like that's not really how it goes. It's like the newsletter will talk about an organization that's doing great work or that just received a lot of funding. And it's going to be up to you to say, oh, I'm going to click on this organization and then I'm going to try to find a job at this organization, or, sometimes in the news, it's a lot of like partnerships and collaboration. So they'll say like, in Atlanta, Atlanta is a good place to look for nonprofit because they have multiple organizations at this point now. And you'll see that they're collaborating with each other. So you might see one organization, Canopy Atlanta is doing this really cool, like text message survey with, the Black community in Atlanta. And then you'll see that they'll partner with, another organization like Atlantic Civic Circle. So like, once you get your foot into one thing, like once you start looking at that American Journalism Project newsletter and start seeing like where the money in the industry is funneling and who these people are giving their dollars to, those are the people you want to go get the jobs from. Like if you see an award where like one organization got $10 million to do quality journalism, you're like, great, I bet you they have a job up that I can get, So it's kind of like just following things and being strategic about the networking. It's not just like giving a business card and hoping that they're going to call. It's like literally following the trails of opportunity.
Yeah. Journalists doing research. That's kind of it, right? Yes. Yeah, but there are big players like Google and stuff is coming increasingly into journalism funding. That's a really good suggestion, right? To see where those lines of funding are coming in, because they are dropping, really big grants and fellowships and things on organizations, particularly for the kind of stuff that you're working in with like local news.
Yeah.
Trying to address issues of like news deserts and so forth.
Oh, wait, the other two I'll give you that are big ones since you talk about Google and Facebook, because what they're really doing with Google and Facebook is Google and Facebook will give money to like Lion, Lion, right, or like ONA, the Online News Association. They'll give the money to them, and then Lion will come in and say, right, here are the top 10 nonprofits who I'm going to distribute this, $15 million to. Right. So yeah, the other ones are ONA and Lion. Those are good newsletters and just organizations that will lead you to where you might want to go. But yeah, Spectrum News, if you're looking for TV, they have local branches everywhere, like throughout the whole country, and they're always hiring. Stay there for a year, get your $35,000 and go to the next job, because that's what you'll see in the industry, is that you don't need to stay at one place forever. You need to go to one place, get the skills you need, and then go do something else with it.
Well, I think we're just at time. Are there any like parting kind of comments for Sierra? Can we thank Sierra?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys. This was cool.
Yeah. So nice to see you. Thanks so much for spending time with us. And
yeah, no problem. Good luck. And feel free to like send me a message anytime. Any of one of you, like on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, like I'll definitely be nice and answer. All right, bye.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.